The spire had been bleeding for as long as anyone could remember. Not blood, exactly. The villagers called it weeping. A thin, rust-colored seep ran down the eastern face of the tower from dawn until dusk, pooling in the cracks of the cobblestones where the market stalls stood every seventh day. It smelled like iron and old rain. Children were told not to touch it. They touched it anyway. Their mothers scrubbed their hands raw and muttered prayers to no god in particular. Cale knew the smell better than anyone. His family's cottage sat closest to the spire's base, tucked into the shadow it cast each afternoon like a sundial counting down to nothing. The weeping ran into their well water 3 months out of the year. His mother boiled it twice. His father stopped drinking it altogether and walked 2 miles to the river instead every morning, in the dark, with a yoke across his shoulders. Cale was 15. He had never spoken a word. Not because he couldn't. The healers in the city had checked him as a baby. Throat was fine. Tongue was fine. Brain was fine, they said, though they said it with a strange look, as if something was fine in a way they didn't fully understand. He simply did not speak. Had never spoken. His mother said he opened his mouth once, at 3 months old, looked directly at her, and closed it again. As if he'd decided. As if he'd heard what the world sounded like and thought, no thank you. He communicated in other ways. A nod. A shake of the head. His hands, which moved quickly and precisely when he needed to say something urgent. A small chalkboard he carried in his coat pocket for longer thoughts. The villagers were used to him. They had been used to him his whole life. He was the shepherd's mute boy. The one who sat by the spire and watched the pilgrims come and go. And they came. Always they came. The thorn spire stood 900 feet tall, built of living stone that grew an inch per century. It was wrapped from base to peak in chains. Not iron chains. Not steel. The chains were made of something the old texts called God steel, a metal that no forge could melt, no hammer could dent, no acid could eat. They wound around the tower in a pattern so complex that looking at it too long made your eyes water. The pattern was called the God knot. 5,000 years ago, the stories said, the gods had tied it. They tied it as a test. A challenge. A dare to every living thing that came after them. Undo the knot, and the throne of making is yours. The power to reshape reality. To unmake death. To build worlds from nothing. 5,000 years. Thousands of attempts. Sorcerers who burned out their minds trying to find the pattern's logic. Lich kings who threw armies of the dead at it until the chains simply absorbed them. Chosen ones, marked by prophecy, anointed by oracles, who walked up to the knot with holy swords and divine blessings and walked away with nothing. The knot tightened with every attempt. Every year it looked more complex than the year before. Every century, another layer seemed to appear. The gods had left long ago. Or died. Or never existed in the way the stories claimed. No one knew. But the spire remained, and the knot remained, and the weeping continued, and the village at its base went on boiling its water twice. Cale watched it all from the hill where he kept his sheep. His name was not really Cale. His mother had named him something else, something long and musical, but he'd pointed at the chalkboard at age 4 and written Cael in careful, deliberate letters, and that was that. His mother cried. His father shrugged. The village adjusted. He was thin in the way of boys who spent more time walking than eating. Brown skin, dark eyes, hair that his mother tried to braid and he immediately undid. He wore the same coat in all seasons, a patchwork thing his grandmother had made before she died, covered in pockets. In the pockets, chalk, a small knife, a coil of rope, a wooden flute he could not play because playing it required blowing and he found the sound unpleasant, 3 smooth stones he'd found in the river, and a folded piece of paper on which he'd written every question he'd never been able to ask. The questions were mostly about the spire. Why does it weep? Why does the knot tighten? Why does no one ask it to stop? He'd written that last one when he was 12. He showed it to his father. His father had looked at the chalkboard, then at the spire, then back at the board. Then he'd handed it back without a word and gone to fetch the river water. That was the thing about the village. They had lived beside the impossible for so long that it had become furniture. The spire was there. The knot was there. Pilgrims came and failed. The weeping stained the cobblestones. You boiled your water. You kept your sheep. You did not ask the furniture why it was sad. Cale asked. He just asked silently. The pilgrims came in waves. Spring brought the faithful, walking in white robes, singing hymns that gave Cale a headache. Summer brought the ambitious, lords and generals with their entourages, treating the spire like a conquest. Autumn brought the desperate, the sick, the grieving, those who wanted to undo a death or cure a plague. Winter brought almost no one. The cold made the god steel contract, and the knot groaned in the wind like a living thing in pain. Cale liked winter best. In winter, the spire was quiet. The pilgrims stayed home. The village huddled by its fires. And Cale could sit at the base of the tower, in the shadow of the knot, and just be near it. He didn't touch it. He'd learned young not to touch it. But he sat close. Close enough to hear it. The knot made sounds. Not loud ones. Not sounds you'd notice if you were talking or singing or marching up with your holy sword. But in the silence of a winter night, with the sheep asleep in their pen and the village dark behind him, Cale could hear it. A creak. A groan. A long, slow exhalation, like something turning over in its sleep. It sounded tired. He'd written that on his chalkboard once, shown it to old Marin, the village's closest thing to a scholar. Marin had squinted at the board, then at Cale, then at the spire. It's stone and metal, boy, she'd said. It doesn't get tired. Cale had erased the board and written, then why does it sound like my father after the long walk? Marin hadn't answered. She'd gone inside and shut her door. Cale didn't blame her. It was easier to believe the spire was furniture. The spring pilgrims arrived on a Tuesday in the month of green rains. Cale was on the hill with the sheep when he saw them coming down the eastern road. 40 of them, maybe 50. White robes. Silver staves. A banner with a sun and an open eye. The order of the unbroken word. He'd seen them before. They came every 3 years, always in spring, always convinced that this time their prayers would be the key. They believed the knot was a language, and that the right sequence of holy words would make it release. They set up camp at the village's edge. Their leader, a tall woman with a shaved head and kind eyes, came to Cale's father to ask permission to use the well. His father nodded. She thanked him. She looked at Cale, standing by the gate, and smiled. "Your boy doesn't speak?" she asked. His father shook his head. "That's all right," she said. The unbroken word teaches that silence is the first prayer. The gods spoke the world into being, but before they spoke, they listened. Cale watched her go. He liked her. She didn't look at him with pity. Most people did. A boy who couldn't speak. Poor thing. What a shame. As if he were a broken cup. As if the words were supposed to be in him and had leaked out. But the woman with the shaved head had looked at him like he was doing something right. The ritual lasted 3 days. Cale watched from the hill, the sheep grazing around him, their bells making small sounds in the wind. The pilgrims formed a circle around the spire's base. They chanted. They pressed their palms to the god steel. Their leader walked the circumference, trailing her fingers along the chains, murmuring words in a language Cale didn't know. On the first day, nothing happened. This was expected. On the second day, the knot groaned. A deep, resonant sound, like a bell struck underwater. The pilgrims cheered. Their leader raised her staff. They chanted louder. On the third day, the knot tightened. Cale saw it happen. He was closer than usual, having walked the sheep down to the lower pasture. He saw the chains shift. Not much. A fraction of an inch. But they pulled inward, compressing, the pattern growing denser. The weeping on the eastern face increased. The rust-colored water ran faster, pooling around the pilgrims' feet. Their leader stopped chanting. She stared at the knot. Her hands were shaking. "It's tighter," she whispered. Cale couldn't hear her, but he could read her lips. He'd gotten good at that. Gods help us. It's tighter. They packed up the next morning. The leader came to Cale's father again, thanked him for the well, and left. She did not look at the spire as she walked away. Cale noticed that. The ones who failed never looked back. He sat on the hill and watched the white robes disappear down the road. Then he looked at the spire. At the knot. At the weeping. He took out his chalkboard. Wrote, "Why does it hurt more when they try to help?" He stared at the words. Erased them. Wrote, "What if it's not a knot?" He stared at that too. Then the sheep bleated, and he went to tend them, and the thought folded itself up and went into his pocket with the stones and the chalk. But it didn't stay folded. Summer came. The lords came with them. Lord Vassarith arrived with 200 soldiers, 4 siege engineers, and a machine. The machine was a thing of brass and crystal, the size of a cottage, hauled up the road by 20 oxen. It was called a resonance engine. Vassarith had spent 11 years and a small country's treasury building it. The theory was sound, his engineers said. The god steel responded to vibration. The right frequency would shake the chains loose. The knot would unravel. Cale watched from the hill. The sheep watched too, though they were more interested in the clover. The engine was positioned at the spire's base. Vassarith himself climbed the platform atop it, a broad man in gilded armor, and gave a speech. His voice carried up the hill. Cale couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. Triumph. Certainty. The voice of a man who had already written the ending of this story and was merely waiting for the world to catch up. The engine activated. A hum, low at first, then rising. The crystal components glowed blue. The air around the spire shimmered. The god steel chains began to vibrate. For 10 seconds, Cale thought it might work. The chains loosened. Just slightly. Just enough that the pattern shifted, and for one heartbeat the knot looked less complex. Then the sound changed. The hum became a shriek. The chains didn't loosen further. They snapped taut. The vibration reversed, amplified, fed back into the engine. The crystal components cracked. The brass housing split. 2 of the oxen broke free and ran. Soldiers shouted. Vassarith leaped from the platform. The engine tore itself apart in a cascade of shrapnel and blue light. 3 soldiers were hurt. No one died, though Cale thought it was close. The knot, when the dust settled, was tighter than before. The weeping ran in rivulets now, staining the cobblestones a deep, angry red. The smell of iron filled the village. Vassarith stood in the wreckage of his 11-year dream. He looked at the spire. He looked at the knot. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then he turned and walked to his horse. He mounted. He rode south. His soldiers followed. The oxen were retrieved. The broken engine was left where it lay. The village cleaned up the shrapnel over the next week. Cale helped. He carried pieces of brass to the scrap pile. He swept crystal dust into a bucket. Old Marin said the dust was worthless. Cale put some in his pocket anyway. That night, he sat at the base of the spire. The knot groaned above him. The weeping trickled down, warm, iron-scented. He pressed his back against the living stone of the tower. It was warm too. Warmer than stone should be in the evening air. He listened. The groan came again. Long, slow. And beneath it, something else. Something he'd never noticed before, or maybe something that had never been there before. A rhythm. Not a heartbeat. Slower than that. But regular. In and out. In and out. Like breathing. Like something vast and old, breathing in its sleep. Cale pressed his ear to the stone. Closed his eyes. The breathing was labored. Wet. Like his grandfather's, in the last winter before he died. Like the sound of something trying to draw air through a throat that was closing. Cale pulled back. Stared at the spire. Took out his chalkboard. It's not a knot. He erased. It's a wound. He stared at the words. The weeping ran down beside him. The iron smell. The warmth. The labored breathing. A wound. Bound up. Wrapped tight. Not tied as a test. Not tied as a challenge. Tied the way you tie a bandage. The way you press cloth against a cut to stop the bleeding. The gods hadn't made a puzzle. They'd made a bandage. And for 5,000 years, everyone had been trying to rip it off. Cale sat in the dark for a long time. The sheep slept in their pen. The village slept behind him. The spire breathed its slow, wet breath above him. He did not go home until the sun came up. He tried to tell his father. Wrote it on the chalkboard, held it up at the breakfast table. The spire is wounded. The knot is a bandage. They shouldn't be trying to undo it. They should be trying to heal it. His father read the board. Set down his spoon. Looked at Cale for a long time. Then he picked up the board, erased it with his thumb, and handed it back. Eat your porridge, he said. Cale ate his porridge. He did not bring it up again. But he went to the hill that day and watched the spire with new eyes. He watched the weeping. Watched the way the chains pressed inward, the way the stone bulged slightly around them, the way the pattern wasn't a pattern at all but a wrapping, layered and layered and layered, each layer added when the one beneath wasn't enough anymore. 5,000 years of bandaging. 5,000 years of the wound not healing. 5,000 years of the god's bandage getting tighter and tighter because the thing beneath it was still bleeding, still trying to breathe, still alive. And every pilgrim, every lord, every chosen one who came to undo the knot was ripping the bandage off a wound that hadn't closed. Making it worse. Making it tighter. making the god's desperate rapping job more necessary, more urgent, more layered. Cale sat on the hill and felt something he couldn't name. Not anger. Not sadness. Something quieter. Something like recognition. Like looking at a hurt animal and understanding, in your body, that it was scared. He went down to the spire that evening. Sat at its base. Pressed his hand to the stone. Warm. Breathing. Alive. He didn't try to undo the knot. He didn't chant or vibrate or command. He just sat there. Hand on the stone. Listening. And for the first time in 5,000 years, the spire's breathing slowed. Just a fraction. Just enough that Cale felt it change beneath his palm. The weeping eased. The iron smell faded. The groan softened into something almost like a sigh. Cale sat until midnight. Then he went home. His father was asleep. His mother left a plate by the fire. Cale ate cold stew and went to bed and dreamed of breathing. He went back the next night. And the next. Every night for a month, while the village slept, Cale walked to the spire and sat at its base and pressed his hand to the stone. He didn't bring the chalkboard. He didn't write anything. He just sat. Listened. Breathed alongside it. The changes were small. The weeping slowed. The water in the well tasted less like iron. His father noticed. Made a comment about the season turning. Cale nodded. The knot didn't loosen. But it stopped tightening. For the first time in 5,000 years, it held steady. The pilgrims who came that summer, a small group of monks from the eastern mountains, noted this. They'd expected the usual resistance, the usual tightening. Instead, the chains were still. Quiet. The monks were confused. They left after 2 days, unsettled by the absence of struggle. Cale watched them go. Then he went to the spire. Pressed his hand to the stone. Felt the breathing. He began to talk. Not with his voice. He didn't have that. But with his hands, moving in the air before the stone. With his chalkboard, propped against the tower's base, where he wrote small things. I'm here. You don't have to be alone. No one's going to hurt you. He didn't know who he was talking to. Didn't know what was beneath the knot. Didn't know if the gods had wrapped a monster or a prisoner or a mistake. He didn't care. The breathing was labored. The weeping was pain. And Cale knew what it was to be in pain and have everyone walk past you because your pain made them uncomfortable. He knew what it was to be silent and have people assume that meant you had nothing to say. So he said things. Wrote them down. Held them up to the stone, as if the thing beneath could read. As if it had been alone for 5,000 years and might need to see a friendly word. I brought you a stone from the river. It's smooth. I thought you might like it. He placed the stone at the base of the spire. A small, gray, river-smooth thing. Nothing special. He had 3 of them. He left one. The next morning, the stone was gone. Not moved. Not knocked away. Gone. As if the spire had absorbed it. As if the thing beneath had taken it. Held it. Kept it. Cale smiled. He left another stone the next night. Word spread, as word does. Not about Cale. No one noticed Cale. He was the mute shepherd's boy. He was furniture too, in his own way. But the spire changed. The weeping slowed to a trickle, then stopped. The iron smell faded. The cobblestones dried. The well water ran clear for the first time in living memory. Old Marin noticed. She came to the spire, walked its circumference, touched the chains. She frowned. She went to the village records, dusty scrolls kept in the back of the meeting hall. She read for 3 days. Then she came to Cale's cottage. "The knot is loosening," she said to Cale's father. "Not from any attempt. Not from any force. It's just loosening. On its own." His father shrugged. "Season changes." "The knot does not respond to seasons," Marin said. "It responds to intent. Someone is doing something." Cale was in the yard, mending a fence post. He kept his head down. Kept hammering. Marin looked at him. He looked at the fence post. She left. But she came back the next week. And the week after. Each time, she walked the spire. Each time, she frowned deeper. The chains were shifting. Not tightening. Not being forced. Shifting gently, like a sleeper adjusting position. The pattern was simplifying. Layers that had been there for centuries were thinning, becoming translucent, becoming less. Something beneath was healing. And as it healed, the bandage was no longer needed. The chains were releasing themselves. Marin started asking questions in the village. Had anyone touched the spire? Had anyone performed a ritual? Had any pilgrim come with a new method? No one had. The last pilgrims were the monks 2 months ago, and they'd done nothing. The last attempt was Vasaritha's engine 3 months ago, and that had made things worse. Marin watched the spire at night. She did not see Cale, who came from the north side, through the sheep pen, in the dark. She watched from the south. She saw nothing. The spire breathed. The chains shifted. The weeping stopped entirely. Cale kept coming. Every night. He talked to the spire. Wrote on his board. Told it about his day. About the sheep. About the weather. About the way the light hit the river in the evening. Small things. Gentle things. The kind of things you say to someone in a hospital bed when there's nothing to fix and all you can do is be there. And the knot unraveled. Slowly. Gently. Not with force. Not with triumph. With release. With the slow exhale of something that had been holding its breath for 5,000 years. It was in the 4th month that the first chain fell. Cale was there when it happened. He was sitting at the base, board in his lap, writing about the new lamb that had been born that morning, a small black thing that wobbled on its legs. He was mid-sentence when he felt the vibration. Not the violent shake of Vasaritha's engine. A gentle tremor. A letting go. Above him, one link of God's steel separated from the pattern. Then another. Then a whole section, maybe 10 feet of chain, simply released. It didn't fall. It dissolved. Turned to silver dust that drifted down like snow, catching the moonlight, settling on Cale's shoulders and hair. He looked up. The knot was smaller. Not by much. But visibly. A section that had been there since before recorded history was simply gone. And where it had been, the stone beneath was smooth. Unmarked. Healing. The spire exhaled. A long, deep breath, the deepest Cale had ever felt. The stone beneath his hand was warmer than ever. Not hot. Warm. Like skin. Like a living thing, fever-breaking. More chains dissolved. Another section. Another. The silver dust fell like gentle snow. Cale sat in it, covered in it, watching the knot undo itself. Not because he'd commanded it. Not because he'd solved it. Because he'd been kind. Because he'd sat with the pain instead of trying to fix it. Because he'd treated the wound like a wound instead of a puzzle. By dawn, a quarter of the knot was gone. The spire stood cleaner than it had in millennia. The stone beneath gleamed. The weeping had stopped completely. The air smelled like rain and grass, not iron. Cale walked home in the silver dust, his coat sparkling, his hair shining. His mother saw him at the door. Stared. Touched the dust on his shoulder. "Cale," she said. "Just his name. Just wonder." He shrugged. Smiled. Went inside. Slept. By the 6th month, half the knot was gone. The world noticed. You couldn't hide 900 feet of living stone shedding its chains. The silver dust fell every night now, drifting over the village, coating the rooftops, settling in the fields. The sheep's wool sparkled. The river ran bright. Pilgrims came, not to undo the knot, but to watch it undo itself. They stood at a distance, awed, silent. No one tried to touch the chains. No one chanted or vibrated or commanded. They just watched. Because watching was what Cale had taught them, though they didn't know his name. The order of the unbroken word came back. Their leader, the woman with the shaved head, stood before the spire and wept. Not from grief. From recognition. She pressed her hand to the stone, the way Cale did, and felt the breathing. Felt the ease of it. The slowing. The healing. "It's not a test," she whispered. It was never a test. She looked around at her pilgrims. At the gathered crowd. At the village. "It was a wound," she said. "And we spent 5,000 years trying to rip the bandage off." The crowd was silent. The spire breathed. The chains dissolved. Silver dust fell. Cale was on the hill with the sheep. He watched the crowd below. He did not go down. He did not need credit. He did not need thanks. He just needed the spire to breathe. And it was breathing. That was enough. But the woman with the shaved head looked up. Looked at the hill. Looked at the thin boy sitting among the sheep, watching. She didn't know his name. Didn't know he was mute. Didn't know he'd been coming every night for 6 months. But she saw him. She raised her hand. A small wave. A recognition. Cale raised his hand back. Then the sheep bleated, and he turned to tend them, and the moment passed. The 9th month was when the breathing changed. Cale felt it immediately. He was at the base, hand on the stone, board in his lap. He'd been writing about autumn. About the way the leaves turned. About how his mother was preserving apples. Small things. The things you say to fill silence when the silence is comfortable. The breathing beneath his hand shifted. Deepened. Became more regular. And then, for the first time, it matched his own. In and out. In and out. Synchronized. As if the thing beneath the knot was breathing with him. Matching him. Meeting him. The chains dissolved faster that night. Great sections falling away, silver dust pouring down like a storm. The knot was 3/4 gone. The spire stood bare and clean, the living stone smooth and warm, glowing faintly from within. A soft light, like a candle behind paper. Like something alive, showing its pulse. Cale sat in the light. In the dust. Breathing with the spire. And he felt, for the first time, a presence. Not a voice. Not a thought. A feeling. Vast and old and tired and grateful. The feeling of being seen. Of being sat with. Of someone saying, I know you're here. You don't have to be alone. He pressed his hand flat to the stone. Felt the warmth. Felt the breath. Felt the gratitude wash over him like a tide. He wrote on his board, You're welcome. He held it up. Showed it to the stone. To the light. To the thing beneath. The light pulsed. Once. Warm. Like a nod. The last chain fell on the first night of winter. Cale was there. He was always there. But this time, he wasn't alone. The whole village had gathered. They didn't know why. They'd felt it coming. The air had been charged for days. The silver dust had been falling in curtains. The spire glowed like a lantern. The breathing was audible now, even from a distance. A great, slow rhythm, like the sea. The last chain dissolved at midnight. The silver dust fell in a final cascade, covering the village, the fields, the hill where the sheep stood watching. For a moment, everything was white and shining. Then the dust settled. The air cleared. And the spire opened. Not broke. Not shattered. Opened. The living stone split along a seam no one had ever seen, a vertical line from base to peak, and the two halves drew apart like hands unclenching. Slowly. Gently. With the care of something that had been clenched for 5,000 years and was finally letting go. Inside was not a throne. Not a weapon. Not a treasure. Inside was a creature. It lay curled in the hollow of the spire, vast and folded, filling the 900-foot space like a cat in a box. It was not a shape Cale had a word for. Not dragon. Not serpent. Not bird. Something older than categories. Something that had existed before the gods decided what things should look like. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, veined with light. Its eyes were closed. Its breathing was the breathing Cale had felt for 9 months. Slow. Deep. Tired. It was wounded. That was clear. Even healed, even released, the scars were visible. Great gashes along its sides, long since closed but never faded. Burned patches where the skin was smooth and featureless. Broken places where limbs should have been, healed wrong, healed crooked. The gods hadn't imprisoned it. They'd hurt it. And then, in their shame, in their fear, they'd wrapped it up. Bound it. Hidden it. Tied the knot not as a test for others but as a secret for themselves. Look away. Don't see what we did. Don't see what's underneath. If no one undoes it, no one has to know. 5,000 years of a bandage over a wound they were too ashamed to heal. 5,000 years of a creature bound in the dark, breathing its slow, wet breath, waiting for someone to sit with it instead of trying to solve it. The crowd gasped. Stepped back. Hands went to swords, to staves, to prayers. Old instincts. Old fears. The thing beneath the knot. The thing the gods hid. It must be terrible. It must be dangerous. It must be the reason they bound it. Cale walked forward. His father grabbed his arm. Cale. No. Cale looked at him. Shook his head. Not no, father. Not danger. Not fear. Just no. Just I'm going. He walked to the open spire. To the creature. To the vast, curled, wounded thing that had been alone in the dark for 5,000 years. He walked up to it. Pressed his hand to its skin. Warm. Alive. Breathing. The creature's eyes opened. They were not terrible. They were not alien. They were old. So old. And tired. And scared. The eyes of something that had been hurt and hidden and bound and had forgotten what it was to be looked at without flinching. Cale looked at it. Did not flinch. Did not reach for a weapon. Did not speak a word of power or command. He took out his chalkboard. Wrote, in his careful, deliberate letters. "My name is Cale. You don't have to be afraid." He held it up. Showed it to the creature. To those ancient, tired, frightened eyes. The creature stared at the board. Stared at Cale. Its breath hitched. A sound came from it, low and resonant, vibrating through the stone, through the ground, through the soles of Cale's feet. Not a word. Not a roar. A sob. A single, vast, 5,000-year-old sob. The crowd went silent. The swords lowered. The prayers stopped. Even the wind held still. Cale set down the board. He couldn't write fast enough. Couldn't write what he needed to say. So he did the only other thing he could. He sat down. Cross-legged. On the cold stone at the creature's side. He pressed his hand to its skin. And he breathed. In and out. In and out. Matching it. Meeting it. Being there. The creature sobbed again. Its body shuddered. The light in its veins flickered. Then steadied. Then brightened. And it breathed with him. They stayed like that for an hour. The crowd watched. No one moved. No one spoke. The village stood in the silver dust and the winter cold and watched a mute boy sit with a wounded god and breathe. The creature's breathing slowed. Deepened. Became steady. The light in its veins settled into a warm, constant glow. The scars didn't vanish. Cale didn't expect them to. You don't undo 5,000 years of pain in an hour. But the flinching stopped. The fear eased. The eyes, watching Cale, softened. Cale picked up his board again. Wrote, "What do you need?" The creature looked at the board. Looked at Cale. Its eyes moved to the crowd. To the village. To the sky above, where the stars were coming out. It looked at all of it with the expression of someone seeing the sun after a long illness. Grateful. Overwhelmed. Uncertain. Then it looked back at Cale. And it did something. It breathed out. A long, slow breath. And in the breath was a sound. Not a word. Not a name. A note. A single, clear, pure note, like a bell struck in an empty room. It hung in the air. It filled the night. It filled Cale's chest. It filled the village, the hill, the river, the sky. It was the most beautiful sound Cale had ever heard. And it was the first sound the creature had made in 5,000 years that wasn't pain. The note faded. The creature's eyes closed. Not in sleep. In peace. In rest. In the simple, profound relief of being seen and not struck. Cale sat with it. Hand on its skin. Breathing. Present. The crowd slowly dispersed. They walked backward, unable to turn their eyes away. They went to their homes. They boiled their water, though it no longer needed boiling. They lay in their beds. They listened to the silence where the groaning used to be. And they slept. Dawn came. The spire stood open. The creature slept inside, curled and breathing, its light dim and steady. The chains were gone. All of them. 5,000 years of God steel, dissolved to silver dust that covered the fields and rooftops and sheep like frost. Cale was still there. He'd fallen asleep against the creature's side. His hand rested on its skin. His board was in his lap. His coat was covered in silver dust. He looked small against the vastness of the creature. Small and young and utterly unremarkable. His mother found him there. She walked across the silver-dusted ground, through the open halves of the spire, to where her son slept against a wounded primordial being. She stood over him for a long time. Then she knelt. Put her hand on his hair. "Cale," she whispered. He woke. Blinked. Looked at her. Looked at the creature. Looked at his hand on its skin. He smiled. Small. Tired. Content. His mother sat down beside him. She didn't ask questions. She didn't demand explanations. She just sat. Put her hand on his back. Breathed with him. Breathed with the creature. The three of them, in the dawn light, in the silence, in the silver dust. The creature's eyes opened. Saw the mother. Saw the hand on her back. Saw the quiet. It blinked. Slowly. And something in its expression changed. The fear eased another fraction. The gratitude deepened. Cale's mother looked at the creature. The creature looked at Cale's mother. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. She reached into her coat pocket. Pulled out an apple. A preserved apple from the jar she'd been filling all autumn. She held it out. An offering. Not to a god. Not to a monster. To a neighbor. To something that had been alone a long time and might be hungry. The creature looked at the apple. Looked at her hand. Looked at Cale. Cale nodded. Small. It's all right. The creature took the apple. Gently. With a limb that unfolded from its side, delicate as a finger. It held the apple. Looked at it. And ate it. Slowly. Carefully. As if it had forgotten how. As if the taste was new. As if no one had fed it in 5,000 years. Cale's mother reached into her pocket. Pulled out another apple. And another. She fed the creature by hand, one slice at a time, the way you feed a sick dog. The way you feed something that's been starving and you don't want to overwhelm. Cale watched. Wrote on his board, "Thank you, Ma." She read it. Smiled. Kept slicing apples. The days that followed were quiet. The creature did not leave. It stayed in the open spire, curled in the hollow of the living stone. It slept mostly. Woke to eat the food the village brought. Apples. Bread. River water. Small things. It didn't need much. 5,000 years of stillness had made it slow, careful, uncertain of its own appetite. Cale came every day. Sat with it. Wrote on his board. Told it about the sheep. About the weather. About the way the light hit the river. The same small things. The same gentle presence. He didn't ask it for anything. Didn't ask it to reshape reality. Didn't ask it to undo death or build worlds. Didn't ask it for the throne of making. He just sat. And breathed. And was there. The creature healed. Slowly. The scars faded, though they never vanished entirely. The broken places mended, though they mended crooked, and would always be crooked. That was all right. That was how healing worked. You didn't go back to what you were before. You went forward into what you were after. The village adjusted. They had lived beside the impossible for 5,000 years. They could live beside the recovered for a while longer. They brought food. They kept their distance when the creature needed sleep. They let Kale be Kale. The boy who sat with the thing in the spire. The boy who didn't speak but said everything that needed saying. Pilgrims still came. But they came differently now. They didn't bring engines or swords or chants. They came with food. With blankets. With silence. They sat at the edge of the village and watched the spire glow its soft, warm light, and they went home. Changed, somehow. Quieter. Kinder. As if seeing the wound healed had healed something in them too. The woman with the shaved head came once more. She sat with Kale at the creature's side. She didn't chant. Didn't pray. She just sat. Breathed. Was present. When she left, she pressed her hand to the creature's skin and whispered, "I'm sorry we tried to rip you open." The creature's light pulsed. Warm. Forgiving. She walked away lighter than she'd come. Lord Vassarith sent a letter. 3 months after the knot dissolved. A formal letter, on heavy paper, with a seal of wax. It was addressed to the village. It said, in careful, legal language, that he wished to apologize. That he wished to know if there was anything he could do. That the 11 years and the treasury had been wasted, but that he understood now. That some things were not meant to be conquered. Kale's father read the letter to the village. They discussed it. They decided to write back. They said, "Come and sit. Bring food. Don't bring machines." Vassarith came in the spring. He was smaller than Kale remembered. Less gilded. He sat at the edge of the spire's clearing and watched the creature breathe. He stayed for 3 days. He did not speak much. He left a crate of apples and a crate of bread and a small, handwritten note that said, "I'm sorry. I thought I was helping." The creature ate the apples. The village ate the bread. Kale read the note, folded it up, put it in his pocket with the smooth stones. A year passed. Then 2. Then 5. The creature grew stronger. It unfolded, slowly, filling the spire's hollow more fully. Its light brightened. Its breathing deepened. It began to move, shifting its vast body, stretching limbs that had been still for millennia. The living stone of the spire grew around it, not as a cage but as a shelter. A home. The two halves never closed. They stayed open, like hands cupped around a flame. Kale grew. 15 became 16. 16 became 17. 17 became 18. He got taller. Thinner, still. His coat got too small, his mother made him a new one, with pockets for the chalk and the stones. He still didn't speak. Still didn't need to. The creature understood his silence. Had understood it from the first night. Had recognized in it something kindred. The language of being present without demanding. The language of sitting with pain instead of fixing it. He still kept the sheep. Still walked the hill. Still watched the river in the evening. But every night he went to the spire. Sat with the creature. Wrote on his board. Breathed. The village went on. The weeping was gone. The well water was clear. The cobblestones were clean. Children played where the iron pools used to be. They didn't know what it had been like before. They didn't know about the 5,000 years. They knew the spire as a place of light. A place where a boy sat with a creature and the creature was not afraid. Old Marin died in the 3rd year. peacefully. In her sleep. Cale went to her funeral. Stood at the back. Wrote on his board, "Thank you for the books." He left it on her grave. Her daughter found it. Cried. Kept it. Cale's father's knees got bad. He couldn't walk to the river anymore. But he didn't need to. The well was clear. The water was sweet. He stood in the yard in the evenings and watched the spire glow and said nothing, because nothing needed saying. Cale's mother kept preserving apples. Jars and jars of them. She brought them to the spire every week. The creature ate them slowly, carefully, one slice at a time. Sometimes it held a slice up to the light, watching the sun shine through it, marveling at the color. Cale's mother would sit beside it and slice more. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. In the 5th year, Cale was 20. He sat at the creature's side on a warm evening in late summer. The sheep were in the pen. The village was quiet. The spire glowed its soft, steady light. The creature was awake, its eyes open, watching the stars through the open halves of the tower. Cale wrote on his board, "Can I ask you something?" The creature looked at him. Blinked slowly. "A yes." "Why did the gods hurt you?" The creature was still for a long time. Its light dimmed. Its breathing slowed. Cale waited. He did not press. Did not push. He just sat. Hand on its skin. Breathing with it. Finally, the creature exhaled. A long, slow breath. And in the breath was not a sound this time but a feeling. A wave of memory that passed through Cale like water. Not images. Not words. Just emotion. Old emotion. 5,000-year-old emotion, preserved in the body like a fossil in stone. Fear. The gods had been afraid. Afraid of what the creature was. Afraid of what it could do. Afraid that it was bigger than them, older than them, more fundamental than them. They hadn't heard it out of malice. They'd heard it out of terror. The way a cornered animal bites. The way a child breaks what they don't understand. And then the shame. The terrible, grinding shame of what they'd done. The way they'd looked at the creature, bleeding and broken, and couldn't bear to see it. So they wrapped it. Bound it. Hid it. Tied the knot and called it a test. Made a story. Made a legend. Made it into a challenge, a quest, a thing for heroes. Because if it was a test, then what they'd done was purposeful. If it was a test, they weren't cruel. They were wise. They were testing the worthy. 5,000 years of a story told to hide a shame. Cale felt it all. The fear. The cruelty. The shame. The long, slow rot of it. 5,000 years of a wound not healing because no one would look at it. No one would say, "This was wrong. This was done out of fear, and it was wrong, and I'm sorry." He wrote on his board, "I'm sorry they did that to you." The creature looked at the board. Its eyes were wet. Not with tears. With light. The light in its veins gathered at the corners of its eyes and overflowed, running down its pale skin like luminous rain. Cale set down the board. Pressed both hands to the creature's skin. Pressed his forehead to it. Breathed. In and out. In and out. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." He couldn't say it. Couldn't speak it. But he meant it with his whole body. With his hands. With his breath. With 20 years of silence that had taught him how to mean things without words. The creature shuddered. The light pulsed. The spire hummed. And then, slowly, the creature leaned into him, pressed its vast head against his small body, against his hands, against his forehead, leaned into him the way a dog leans into the hand that pets it, the way a child leans into the parent who says, I know, I'm here. They stayed like that until the stars came out, until the moon rose, until the village slept and the sheep dreamed and the river ran silver in the dark. Cale, 20 years old, mute, thin, wearing a coat with too many pockets, holding up the head of a primordial being with his hands and his forehead and his breath. It was enough. It was everything. It was the only thing that had ever been needed. In the 7th year, the creature spoke. Not in words. Not in any language Cale knew. It spoke in the way it had always spoken. In breath. In light. In the slow pulse of its veins. But this time, the speech was directed. Intentional. Aimed at Cale specifically. A communication meant for him and him alone. He was sitting at its side, bored in his lap, writing about the new roof his father had put on the cottage. The creature's light shifted. Changed pattern. Became structured. Rhythmic. Like letters. Like sentences. Cale watched. Waited. Felt the meaning assemble itself in his mind, not as words but as understanding. Direct. Unfiltered. Bypassing language entirely. The creature said, You could have asked. Cale looked up. Wrote, Asked what? For the throne. The making. The power. Every being that came before you wanted it. Wanted to undo the not to claim it. You undid the not. The throne is yours. You could reshape the world. You could speak, if you wished. You could be anything. Have anything. Cale stared at the board. Stared at the creature. Felt the offer hang in the air between them. Vast. Real. Genuine. The power to reshape reality. The power that 5,000 years of seekers had bled and died and failed to claim. His. For the asking. He picked up his chalk. Wrote slowly. Carefully. Deliberately. No thank you. The creature blinked. Its light flickered. Confused. Cale wrote more, I don't want to reshape the world. I want to sit here. With you. And breathe. And watch the sheep. And eat my mother's apples. That's enough. That's everything. The creature was still for a long time. Its light dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again. Processing. Understanding. Feeling, perhaps, the strangeness of it. 5,000 years of beings clawing at the knot, desperate for power. And the one who opened it didn't want it. Didn't want the throne. Didn't want the making. Didn't want to be anything other than what he was. A boy. Mute. Thin. Wearing a coat with too many pockets. Sitting at the base of a spire with a wounded creature, watching the stars. The creature's light pulsed. Warm. Deep. A feeling washed over Cale that he could only call love. Not romantic. Not familial. Something older. Something more fundamental. The love of being seen. Of being chosen. Of being enough. Then the throne unmade, the creature said. The power goes back. Into the stone. Into the light. Into the breathing. It was never meant to be held by one. It was meant to be shared. To be present. To be the warmth in the stone and the light in the veins and the breath in the night air. It was always here. In the sitting. In the being with. In the small kindness of a boy who brought river stones and wrote hello. Kale read the words in his mind. Felt them settle. Felt the truth of them. The throne of making wasn't a seat. Wasn't a crown. Wasn't a power to be wielded. It was the act itself. The sitting. The breathing. The being present. The choosing to stay with someone in their pain instead of trying to fix them or use them or conquer them. Every person who'd come to undo the knot had wanted the power. Had wanted to take. To claim. To make the world into what they wanted. And the knot had tightened. Because you cannot heal a wound by force. You cannot undo a bandage with a hammer. You cannot earn trust by demanding it. Only Kale had come with nothing. Wanted nothing. Asked nothing. Just sat. Just breathed. Just was. And that was the key. Had always been the key. 5,000 years of the smartest, strongest, most powerful beings in creation, and the answer had been the simplest thing in the world. Be there. Be kind. Be quiet. Be present. Kale set down his chalk. Pressed his hand to the creature's skin. Felt the warmth. Felt the breath. Felt the light pulse in time with his own heart. He smiled. The creature breathed. The spire glowed. The stars came out. Kale lived his whole life in the village at the base of the spire. He never spoke. Never needed to. He kept the sheep until he was too old to walk the hill, and then his nephew's children kept them, and he sat on the porch and watched them go. He mended fences. He ate his mother's apples, and then his own, preserved in the same way, in the same jars, in the same cellar. He wore coats with too many pockets until the day he died. He went to the spire every night. Every single night. From 15 to 73. 58 years of sitting. Of breathing. Of writing small things on a chalkboard. Of pressing his hand to the warm stone and the warm skin and feeling the breath match his own. The creature healed. Slowly. Over decades. The scars faded to silver lines. The broken places mended, still crooked, still imperfect, but strong. The light in its veins grew steady and warm. It filled the spire's hollow completely, a vast and gentle presence, glowing softly through the open halves of the tower. The village lived in its light. Grew in its warmth. Children were born in it and grew up in it and grew old in it and never knew a world without it. The world beyond the village changed. Kingdoms rose and fell. Technologies came and went. The old stories of the god knot faded into myth, then into legend, then into fairy tale. Once, they said, there was a tower wrapped in chains, and a boy sat with it, and the chains fell away. Children heard it and forgot it. Children heard it and remembered. Children grew up and told it to their own children, and the story changed each time, but the center held. A boy. A wound. A sitting. A breathing. That was the center. That was always the center. Pilgrims still came, though fewer each year. They came to sit. To breathe. To be quiet. The creature welcomed them all. Did not judge. Did not test. Did not demand. Just breathed with them. Just was present. Just let them be. Kale's mother lived to 80. She fed the creature apples until her hands shook too much to slice. Then Kale sliced them. Then his wife, a quiet woman from the river village who understood silence the way Kale did, who had married him not despite his mute but because of it, because she too had found the world too loud and had chosen the quiet. She sliced apples. The creature ate them. The light pulsed. The evening passed. Cale's father died at 76. In his sleep. In the winter. Cale sat with him the night before. Held his hand. Didn't write anything. Didn't need to. Just sat. Just breathed. Just was there. His father squeezed his hand once. Then slept. Then didn't wake. Cale grieved. Of course he grieved. He sat at the spire that night and pressed his forehead to the creature's skin and shook. The creature breathed around him. Warm. Steady. Present. Not fixing. Not solving. Just being there. Just saying, without words, I know. I know. I'm here. Cale grieved, and the creature grieved with him, and the spire's light dimmed for 3 days, and the village walked softly, and then the light returned, and the breathing returned, and life went on. Because it does. Because that's what breathing is. In and out. In and out. Even when you don't want it to. Even when the out-breath carries someone you loved. You breathe in again. You go on. Cale died on a summer night. 73 years old. Thin as ever. Still in the coat with the pockets, though it was threadbare now, patched 100 times. Still carrying the chalk. Still carrying the smooth stones. Still carrying the folded paper with the questions, though most of them had been answered now. Not in words. In years. In sitting. In the slow, patient work of being present. He died at the spire. Of course he did. Where else would he die? He was sitting at the creature's side. Hand on its skin. Board in his lap. He'd been writing about the sunset. About how the river turned gold. About how his granddaughter had laughed at supper. Small things. Gentle things. The things you say to fill the silence when the silence is a gift. His hand went slack. The chalk fell. The board tipped. His head leaned forward against the creature's skin. His breathing slowed. Slowed. Stopped. The creature felt it. The absence. The small, warm weight going still. The hand on its skin going cold. It breathed out. A long, slow breath. The longest it had ever breathed. And in the breath was the note. The same note as the first night. The clear, pure bell tone. But softer now. Gentler. A lullaby. A thank you. A goodbye. The note filled the spire. Filled the village. Filled the night. Every person in the village heard it. Stopped what they were doing. Looked toward the spire. Knew. The creature's light dimmed. Not in death. In mourning. In the deep, vast grief of losing the one who had stayed. The one who had sat. The one who had been enough. But then, slowly, the light steadied. Brightened. Because the creature remembered. Remembered the breathing. Remembered the sitting. Remembered 58 years of a small, warm hand on its skin. Remembered the chalkboard. The river stones. The apples. The silence that was not empty but full. It breathed in. Breathed out. And in the out-breath, it released something. A warmth. A light. A presence. Not the creature itself. But the memory of Cale. The shape of his sitting. The pattern of his breathing. It went into the stone. Into the spire. Into the light that glowed through the open halves of the tower. The throne of making. The power that wasn't a power. The gift that wasn't a gift. The presence that remained when the person was gone. Cale was in the spire now. In the light. In the warmth. In the breathing. Not as a ghost. Not as a soul. As a kindness. As a sitting. As the feeling of being present with someone in their pain. As the memory of a boy who didn't speak and didn't need to. Who sat and breathed and was enough. The village buried Cale on the hill. Beside the sheep pen. Where he could watch the spire. Where the spire could watch him. His wife was there. His children. His grandchildren. The village. The woman with the shaved head, very old now, leaning on a staff. A few pilgrims. Quiet people. Kind people. People who understood that the greatest thing you could do for someone was sit with them and not look away. They didn't speak much at the burial. Didn't need to. They stood in the silver light of the spire. They breathed. They were present. They let the silence be full. Cale's wife placed the chalkboard on the grave. The last thing he'd written. The last small, gentle thing. A note about the sunset. About the river turning gold. About his granddaughter's laughter. The wind took the chalk dust. The words faded. But the meaning stayed. In the stone. In the light. In the breathing. The creature in the spire pulsed its light. Warm. Steady. Constant. A vigil. A remembrance. A promise. I'm here. You don't have to be alone. 1,000 years later, the spire still stood. The village had grown into a town. The town had grown into a city. But the spire remained. Open. Glowing. Breathing. The creature lived still, vast and gentle, filling the hollow of the living stone. Its scars were silver now. Beautiful. Like rivers on a map. Like the lines on an old face. Like the marks of a long life, fully lived. People came to the spire. Not to undo a knot. There was no knot. Not to claim a throne. There was no throne. They came to sit. To breathe. To be quiet. To press their hands to the warm stone and feel the breathing and remember that they were not alone. That they had never been alone. That somewhere, in the deep time of the world, a boy had sat down and stayed. And the staying had been enough. The creature breathed. In and out. In and out. The light pulsed. The stone was warm. The night was quiet. And if you pressed your ear to the spire, in the deep silence of a winter night, when the city slept and the stars came out, you could hear it. Not a groan. Not a weeping. Not the sound of a wound. A breathing. Steady. Warm. Alive. And beneath the breathing, if you listened very carefully, a small sound. Like chalk on stone. Like a hand writing small, gentle words. I'm here. You don't have to be alone. No one's going to hurt you. The creature breathed. The light pulsed.